No, you are.
Huh? What? Hi, welcome everyone. So we are live today with Gretchen from Kodable to discuss coding. Yay! So, without further ado, here's our co-host David.
Hi, everybody.
We'll add our labels and titles up here in a moment. And so let's go ahead and get started. So, Gretchen, how about if you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I am Gretchen. I am a founder of Kodable. We started Kodable about 2 years ago in Louisville, Kentucky, and we stayed in Kentucky for about a year, and just recently moved a little over a year ago, moved to California. I was a part of the Imagine K-12 Fall 2013 cohort, and yeah, I just am super excited to be on the show today. I love teaching kids about programming. I really believe in, obviously, I really believe in teaching kids programming. That's why I founded Kodable. So, yeah, that's definitely my biggest passion at the moment. So, yeah.
Um, if you were to describe yourself as a kid, how would you do that? And do you think that that in some way influences the way that you think about developing these tools via Kodable?
Absolutely, yeah. So I I am a very creative. As a kid, I was always like painting, drawing, doodling, and even in high school, I was like drawing. I have this page from my chemistry notes that was actually not any notes. It was just like this big giant page that was like a semester-long art piece of artwork that I worked on throughout chemistry. Needless to say, science was not my strong suit. um, but I really enjoyed being creative, language arts, and I was always in choir from the time I was in like second grade on through. I was in choir. I just was very like, I don't want to say artsy, but like very creative and outgoing and just like having fun. And definitely that plays into the way that Kodable is developed because I didn't start like learning about technology really. I always considered myself like pretty bad with technology until I got to college. And then once I started like learning about HTML and CSS and getting involved in that, like it really opened my eyes to the opportunities that learning to code can have. And so because I didn't have a lot of experience with it until that point, my experiences prior to that like really influenced the way that Kodable was developed. I wanted to make Kodable into something that kids who maybe didn't have an affinity for math and science would be able to start learning about programming to make it more mainstream. I think that there's a lot of great things out there, but there's not a lot for the kids who don't already have an affinity for it. And so that's what I wanted to make Kodable into, something that was for the other kids, the kids like me who weren't as technologically savvy, who were a little bit more artsy and interested in colors and being creative. And so that's why that really influenced the development of Kodable.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you got into coding in college? I mean, what was your exposure? What was your introduction to HTML and CSS and those types of things?
Yeah, so it was kind of a fluke actually. I during college I was doing internships. I started doing internships a lot earlier than a lot of the other people with my major. I majored in communications, and we're only required to do one internship, but I did four because I wanted to, kind of differentiate myself, differentiate my resume, like, get experience. And in one of those internships, I got the opportunity to design a website. And I was really excited. I'd never designed a website before. I didn't know the first thing about it. And so I started learning and teaching myself. And after the internship finished, and it was supposed to go to a developer to build the website that I had designed, the developer backed out. It fell through. And so they said, hey, would you want to build it for us? I said, sure. I have no idea how, but okay. So I spent another semester learning HTML and CSS to build the website that I had designed. And so it was a really good opportunity after that. I had a bunch of other internships open up because like I had taught myself those skills, and then as we were starting Kodable, it really it paid the bills. So Kodable wasn't making money, like we were just starting out, and so we were able to bootstrap using the skills that I had learned in college with HTML, CSS, and design. So yeah, it definitely, I didn't learn any of it in school. I took one design course, but halfway through college, I was like, hey, I'm really interested in graphic design, but if I want to switch my major, I have to be here another 2 years. So I decided to just teach myself.
So when you say you taught yourself, what resources or people, what materials did you use to make that happen?
Google.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you're learning anything on your own, design is one thing. Like, you kind of have to have like an eye for it, but I think a lot of the basic design principles, like best practices, you can learn by reading. And so I read a lot of like Smashing Magazine and design websites and blogs to learn the basics. And then as I was, working on Kodable or working on websites or whatever, I would look at examples of things that I wanted to bring into what I was trying to design, and then kind of copy that, and then look for tutorials on how to do it. And so that it was just a lot of Googling and trial and error. And I started out using Photoshop, and then once we started working on Kodable, quickly switched to Illustrator. But yeah, it was a lot of just like figuring out like what problem I was facing and Googling how to do that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. There's a lot of other stuff out there, but that's the basics.
Sure. I mean, I think when I first started years ago, my best friend was the view source option in any browser. The fact that you could, and now so much of it is off, you can't read it anymore, but back in the day, you could go through and you could really read exactly what they were doing to put that site together. And that was so instructive for me to see how Apple put their site together, or how Patagonia put their site together. Those are like, when I think about when I first started building websites, those are the sites that I kind of emulated everything I did on, because they're so clean and so consistent and so user-friendly. And you could just go right through and view source, and boom, there it was.
Yeah, I did a lot of that too. We still do that. I don't actually do any of the coding for Kodable, but the guys, they're always like, oh, what do they do? Oh, okay, yeah, I see how they do that. We can do something similar. So I think a lot of like design and programming, like the industries are just really open. Like it's okay to like take bits and pieces of what other people are doing and apply it to what you're trying to do. And it's not seen as like copying or cheating or anything like that. It's more just like, let's learn from each other and build on it and make it better.
Right.
So.
Right. So I have a question. So if there's someone who is unfamiliar with Kodable, do you have sort of like an elevator pitch? Is that something that you all put together? Like, what is your 30-second elevator pitch for what Kodable is and what it attempts to do?
Sure, yeah. I'm a little rusty because actually John does all of our pitching, but I can just tell you a little bit. Usually I just tell people a little bit about what Kodable is. So Kodable is a programming curriculum for kids 5 and up. We teach kids the basics of any programming language through a fun game. So by making things a little bit more intuitive and more inviting, our goal is to make programming mainstream. So we want them to be able to start learning a programming language by the time they reach middle school. And to facilitate that, we offer resources and curriculum materials for teachers and parents.
Wow. All right. That was succinct, and that was to the point. That was very informative.
Thank you.
And I noticed from your website that you're actually Common Core aligned.
Yeah, we are. We had some awesome people in North Carolina, Edulum. They do like curriculum, Common Core alignment. They helped us on that, so they did a great job.
How did Kodable get started? What was the challenge or the opportunity that you saw that you were trying to address?
It's really funny, actually. We were working on something totally different. We graduated and we're interested in we wanted to do a startup, but our idea was online marketing. and it was in online marketing. And then as we were talking to people who would be like potential customers, the conversation just kept turning, like with 4 or 5 of them over the course of like a week. Like every single conversation kept turning to like teaching kids programming. And I'm a big believer of like, if something keeps coming up, like you should probably take a better look at it. So like John started, my co-founder started learning programming and he was 6, and all of our friends and the people we were talking to kept saying like, my kids are only 4, but I see like the change that, you know, learning to code has made for you, and I want my kids to have the opportunity to, like, there's a lot of jobs and great skills that come along with learning to code, and I want my kids to have that opportunity, but I have no idea where to start. And so that was sort of the idea. We were like, okay, we're really interested in this, like, because my background, having not like learned a lot about programming until college, and then John starting to learn when he was 6, like we had very good, you know, very good ideas of like the difference that learning to code can make. And so it was something we were both really passionate about and interested in, and so we decided to stop what we were working on and just give this a shot for 3 months, and it turned out that we were really excited about it, and it worked out really well, so we stayed with it.
And so so you worked on it for 3 months. Apparently there was enough momentum, progress in that 3 months to propel you to where you are now. What happened in those 3 months?
We did a lot of research on like child development, how kids think, where something like this would need to start, what programming concepts we would want to teach, and if kids, like at what age kids are like developmentally able to start learning that. And then we built a prototype. It had 8 levels, no menu, really similar to the web version that we're testing now, but it was just the most basic of basic prototypes, and we took it and we tested it with a bunch of kids, and we watched how they used it, aging all the way from 3 years old to 9, and we learned about you know, what the bugs were, where we could improve, what were sort of the barriers, and we were just really passionate about it. We just like fell in love with the idea, and so that's what kept us going, you know, and still continues to keep us going, is just the passion. But within that 3 months, that's what we were doing, working on getting a version out into the App Store.
And so in those 3 months when you were, you know, doing all that work, did you have mentors that you were working with? Did you have people who were guiding you or informing your sort of vision making or your planning?
Yeah, we were in Louisville at that point, and in Kentucky and in Louisville, they're really working on trying to facilitate, you know, new businesses, growing startups. There's a couple of accelerators that have popped up there, but the Chamber of Commerce in Louisville has really done a lot to like facilitate new business, and so we were working with some mentors through there who really helped us out a lot. And then after about 8 months of working on it, we got a grant from the Kentucky Science and Technology Corporation, and so sorry, it's an acronym, so I had to make sure that I was saying it right. And they gave us a grant to like continue working on it, and so yeah, there was a lot of guidance and assistance from like the network that we had sort of joined after graduation, and like developed friendships and relationships, and everyone was kind of cheering for us and helping us and mentoring us.
So you had mentioned this, I guess for lack of a better way, getting access to actual students using this prototype. How did that work through the state or the city? How did you sort of get the prototype into the hands of kids?
That was all, so at that point, we didn't actually start focusing on education until about 8 months into the project. Up until, from that point, like at the point where we had the prototype, we were working with just friends, kids. You know, our network, I grew up in Louisville, so I had a pretty big network of people that I knew that had kids within our age range, and they just came and met us, and there was a local business that like let us use their facility, as a testing facility, and we
That's
just
amazing.
met there, and for weeks we were having people meet us there and testing it with their kids. So it was all parents who were willing to take the time out of their afternoons.
Well, and speaking of testing, how did you guys decide to go to be an app-based company versus being a web-based company?
It all has to do with the age range. So we wanted to start earlier than anything else at the time that was on the market for teaching programming. And we knew that while kids are like, they're starting to like think logically, and the concepts like would be pretty, they'd be capable of learning them, it's going to be difficult. And so we wanted to deliver it in a way that would be pretty intuitive for them. And the iPad is just so tactile and just so easy and intuitive to pick up and start learning. It was the best medium for teaching these skills. Since then, we've started working on a web version because we've been working with teachers and students for over 2 years now. We started to see that kindergartners are learning about like how to use a mouse and how to use a keyboard and like using a trackpad. And so there's some that are going to be capable of using Kodable on the web. So we're working on a version for that too.
How do you, sorry, Tara, how do you solicit feedback from, so you have teachers and students using it all over the country, as you said. How are you getting input from them as to feature improvements or changes or whatever it is that they would like to see in the product moving forward?
Yeah, we try to make it as easy as possible to get in touch with us. We're really active on Twitter, social media, in everywhere in the app. Well, not everywhere, not in the game, but like anywhere where an adult would be like interacting with Kodable, there's an option to contact us. So we try to make it really, really simple. Like if you have feedback, if you have a suggestion, or if you have a question, you can contact us really quickly. And we all rotate support days, so there's always somebody whose job it is to be responding to those questions. And so we try and do it that way. But we also, you know, if you sign up for our curriculum, like we email within a week or two and say, hey, how's it going? Just check in and like see how things are going and ask for feedback. The only way that we can know is if you all tell us. So we're always trying to ask people. The other thing is, like, when we joined Imagine K-12, they really helped us develop a network here in California. So there's a lot of local schools that and teachers who are really willing to just open up their classroom and let us come in and watch the kids use it and get some ideas for how we can improve the game and the students' experience as well. So it's kind of three. We reach out, people come to us, and then we have like local people that we can go to and ask questions.
I was waiting, Tara, for you because it sounded like I jumped on your last question.
It's okay. We'll come back to that when we start talking about the hour of code. But there was a key word that just came up. Imagine K-12.
Yeah, so do you want me to just tell you what it is? Or?
Generally, sure.
Yeah, okay, so Imagine K-12 is an ed tech accelerator. Accelerator meaning that they are kind of like boot camp for startups, and they help us kind of get from idea to like product market fit, meaning we've reached a point where like the product that we're offering meets the market's needs. And so it's a 4-month program. They usually take 10 or 12 companies and give them a little bit of money to live off of and to grow with, and provide mentorship and guidance and connections in the Bay Area for helping these companies grow.
What is the application process for this organization?
It's a pretty quick, like 10 or 12 question application, and you fill it out and then wait and wait and keep your fingers crossed. And then they'll let you know whether or not you receive an interview, and then you come out to the Bay Area or do like a Google Hangout, Skype interview with the partners, and it's a 15-minute interview where they grill you on like what your idea is and why it's important and how you're going to make a difference and whether or not you can actually execute. And then, you get the word whether or not you're in. So, yeah.
And so they do 10 to 12 a year, was that right? Or 10 to 12 every quarter?
Every year. Yeah, it starts in the fall of every year. They were doing 2 a year, and then they recently, starting with my cohort, they started doing it just once a year, one batch a year. Because with education, like it takes a little bit longer to like start seeing effects of something, and so they like to have like the first fall semester like be like the testing phase, and then the spring semester like you can kind of see the growth and the trajectory of the company, and then starting in they can help us continuing in that second semester. Whereas I think before it, if they were doing 2 a year, the next cohort would be like getting all of the help, and so the teams from before might be falling behind a little bit. So I think it's just so that they can offer more focused assistance.
Right.
I don't know. You'd probably have to talk to them to get their full reasons for why they switched to 1 a year. But who are the other companies in your cohort that are working in the ed tech space? Oh, there were 13 companies. There's Edpuzzle, and oh my gosh, I'm blanking. Okay, so
no, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's fine. I know them all. I just can't think of them. Edpuzzle. I've got them on Dean's List. Get It was one. Let's see what else. There's Class Kick. There's Panorama. Let me see. Front Row. School-mint, and there's a couple of other. John's yelling at the.
I was going to say.
What's the other one? Cambu. Yeah, there's a bunch. So.
There are quite a few that I recognize in there.
Yeah.
Oh. So to bring it back to Kodable, I guess I had a couple of questions. It sounded like as you went from your first idea of what Kodable would be through those 3 months, your maybe idea of where it fit into the marketplace might have changed a bit. And so I guess my question is two-part. One would be, how is Kodable different in its present manifestation from what you initially visioned it would be? And then moving the lens in the opposite direction, like projecting ahead 3 to 5 years, like what do you see Kodable becoming? What would you love to see it doing and providing to students and teachers? And I guess the follow-up to that would be, how are you all working to sort of make that a reality?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess the biggest difference between, the reason I was laughing is I was cleaning out my Dropbox folder, and I saw one of the original game mock-ups for Kodable, and it was completely different. It was so bad. It was so horrible. But I just did it up in PowerPoint just to do something quick and sketch it out and get the idea on paper.
But that should be shared out as like on Twitter with the hashtag iteration or something, right?
Yeah, I can. Hold on, let me see if I still have it up. Let me see. Oh yeah, I do. Do you want to see it?
Totally.
Okay. Here we go. So do you see it?
No, I saw a black screen, and now I'm looking at you again.
Oh.
It was that first split second.
Oh, I didn't see. Oh, there it is.
So the idea was you could assign, I think what I was thinking is you could assign like values to a bubble and then like somehow get it to move across like the screen, and then you tap on it to like change the values. Yeah, it was pretty rough.
But this is like a perfect example, right? So like, because I would imagine that you're always going through this process of development. Like, here's an idea for something we could do. Here's a SketchUp. Here's a prototype. Here's a mock-up. What are the steps that you all go through to bring something from that initial idea to something that actually is in the hands of students?
Yeah, so we did a lot of testing. Like I was saying, we tried it with students. And then after that, we spent a lot of time talking to teachers. So we went around once like we had an idea, like this is something that could really work in the classroom. We spent a lot of time talking to over 100 teachers in Louisville, asking them like, what would you, if you wanted to teach programming, what would you need in order to be successful at that? And a lot of them were like, what is programming? And so like we realized very quickly like, there's some big challenges that we're going to have to face and help them overcome in order to be successful doing that. And so within, I'd say like 8 months, 8 to 10 months, we figured this was something that would be working really well in the classroom. And so that's when we kind of transitioned. That's when we kind of transitioned, sorry, from like making something for parents into something that would work in the classroom. And so that was a big shift in like understanding what people needed from Kodable. And then even now, like I guess moving to the second part of the question, our like long-term goal is to make programming something that's mainstream. That you know, you learn math, you learn science, you learn how to read and write. You also learn programming. And so our goal for the next 3 to 5 years would be to make something that is like all-encompassing, like all you need in order to teach programming curriculum for K to 5th grade. And that way, kids and teachers and everyone is getting the opportunity to teach and learn programming in a way that's fun and easy for them. So yeah, that's kind of our long-term goal. What was the third part? Sorry.
Sort of, what is your team doing to work on making that vision reality? It's kind of a vague question, but like who are you? I mean, I imagine you go to conferences and you're networking with teachers, and you're doing the Imagine K-12 and your cohort, network, and you're working with mentors, like all those types of things. Like, what are you doing? How would you describe what you're doing to bring it to the next level?
Always focusing on listening to teachers and kids and students on what their needs are, and then focusing completely on making sure that our product meets those needs. Is the simplest answer I can give. It's tough. It's kind of a hard question to answer, but every single day, like we're always thinking about like how we can make it better and simplify Kodable for teachers. So yeah.
And well, I'm sorry, Tara, you had a question.
Well, I was just gonna do a commercial break real quick. So speaking of questions, if anybody in the audience has any questions, we have the question and answer app enabled, so feel free to post your questions and we will get to those before the end of the show. That is all.
Perfect. So when you think about Kodable and you think about bringing this into the curriculum, at its foundational level, like what are the skills and competencies that you're hoping Kodable will help bring to students? We talked about programming as being in there with reading and writing and with math, but why? Like, what are those foundational skills and competencies that we hope programming will help instill in students?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing how like just seeing like you think like, oh, programming is something that's important because like we all use technology and like we need to understand how that technology is made in order to like become better like digital citizens, right? But then like the side effects of learning the basics of programming like really make a difference for students in other areas. So we've seen kids, for example, Ann Jinks was telling me, she's a teacher in Southern California, she was telling me that since she started teaching their students coding, that she's seen an increase in her ESL students' test scores, their math abilities, their communication skills, and just their overall confidence has really increased because they're able to sort of learn to persevere through that extra barrier that they're experiencing and just learning to communicate with their peers. And so the programming is something that kind of they're able to not have to worry about that language barrier and learn to persevere through other issues and other problems and sort of be good at. And then, other things include communication. One thing that I like to see kids doing when they're learning to code is pair programming. So they can team up with another student and they work together to solve a problem. And that's a really important skill not only for programming but just for life, like learning to work together to solve a problem and communicate with one another to solve a problem is really important. And with Kodable in general, like there's a lot of math applications. You learn to pick out patterns, count, recognize like repeating things, assigning a rule to something, variables, things like that, and just problem-solving skills. Yeah, those are all things that I think are applicable across subjects. So it's important for their future because like technology is such a big part of our lives, and it's going to continue to like become more a part of our lives, and like there's going to be tons of jobs available. But even if they don't become programmers, like being able to understand the basics of a programming language and be able to communicate with the programmers that they do work with is going to be a valuable skill for them. So.
Right. There was an article, I think today, in The Guardian that said essentially all students should learn to program, but not all should learn to code. And the author makes a distinction between coding, as that implies, learning a specific semantic language, versus programming, which is more logical problem solving and reasoning. And he makes this interesting distinction between the two, and makes the push for, we don't have to be learning Python per se, but some of those elements within any language are useful. And what I love about it is it's so cross-curricular. It can be those skills that we could use in Kodable or any other type of sort of programming platform are useful in math or in reading. Or, I love that Sam Patterson, his vision right now is to use coding for teaching literacy in lower school, right? And so we tend to automatically assume that when we think about computer science and programming that it's math or it's a science, but it has applications across all the curricula, as we know, and so that's what I love about it, frankly.
Yeah, it's interesting. It doesn't matter like what you're interested in. If you want to grow up and be a fashion designer, if you want to work in agriculture, if you want to work in medicine, if you want to work in education, every single industry needs programmers. Every single one. And so that's what I tell kids. I'm like, it doesn't matter what you want to do. Like, there's going to be programmers that work with you, and there's going to be programming jobs available. So it doesn't have to be like the super geeky thing. You can be in high fashion, and there's programmers that they need. So, yeah, you're completely right.
For sure. And even the personal skills and habits of mind around resiliency and focus, attention. I had a student in here the other day working on coding a website in HTML, and was stuck because he had, he'd gone through it like for 15 minutes trying to figure out why it wasn't, rendering the image. And I went over and we discovered that instead of IMG SRC, he had IMG SCR, but it was within about 87 lines of code, and it was just that one thing that was one reversal, and that was rendering it. It was making it render incorrectly, and but he sat there for like 15 minutes trying to figure it out, and I really applauded that. Instead of just being like, I don't get it, and walking away, he'd been doing it for long enough that he knew that there was some way he was going to get to the bottom of it, and he pushed through it.
Yeah, and that like sense of accomplishment once you figure out the bug is just like, oh, that's the best part of programming.
Yes. Yeah. And that instant feedback that you get, like it's working, it's not working, it's working, it's not working, and there's not that I hand in my paper and I get it back a week and a half later with corrections on it. Like I can instantly, get feedback that will then inform my next decision or what I'm going to do next. And I think that's so important for kids and for anybody who's trying to learn this stuff. So Sam Patterson had a question. He couldn't be here because he was traveling today. And he wanted to know about your sound effects. He says, how did you create the sound effects for the game? It involves using the car, something about a car. So he wanted to make sure we asked you that question.
Okay, this is one of the greatest stories. Okay, so we, for up until like 3 months ago, made Kodable out of our house. We worked from home, and we had hardwood floors. And so if you ever try and record anything in a room that has hardwood floors, there's a horrible echo. I do all of the voices. John and I do all of the voices for the fuzzes and everything in the game. And so I would try and record, and it was just this terrible echo. And so I built this like box that had like an old mattress pad like stapled to it to like be like this little recording thing, and that still didn't work. There was still a horrible echo. So we ended up taking my laptop into the car and parking in the garage and closing the garage and recording all of the sound effects in the garage on my laptop with a mic. And so that's how all of the sounds are made in Kodable, is from our garage. So some ingenuity there.
And even
we
as you
realized that
scale up,
the car had no echo at all.
right. And so even as you scale up, you're going to continue to record all those sounds in the car?
Unless we can find a better place to record or outsource our voices, I think, yes, we will continue to record them in the garage.
Love it. That's great. That's some innovation right there.
Yeah.
Well, innovation and iteration, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
So, I mean, looking back over the last however long it's been that you've been working on Kodable, what have you learned along the way about app development specifically? I mean, lessons that you've learned about either the industry or the market, sort of personal, professional. What have you learned about app development?
That's a tough question.
It's a tough question.
So I think
No
probably the
softballs here.
biggest thing is that you can't make everyone happy, even though you want to. Again, it's really hard, and you like really struggle. Like, I want to make everyone happy. You can't, and often like there's gonna be barriers to doing anything, like just in life. Like, there's gonna be hard stuff that you have to come up against, and so like for example, like there was. When we wanted to submit an update to Apple, and it had like there was just this minor change, and they rejected it because of something that was completely unrelated that had been in the app for like 6 months. And we're like, really? And so like you just have to kind of deal with like things that come up with patients, and just kind of work around it and deal with what you have to deal with in order to continue to offer like a good product to people. So. You can't always make people happy, and there's going to be problems that come up, but you have to work around them.
So one of our viewers, Dr. Will, actually had a question saying, how does someone bring Kodable into the classroom, and what is the cost?
So if you want to use Kodable in your classroom, you can download it from the App Store. Right now it's on the iPad.
Okay.
The iPad App Store, sorry. And it's free to use with 25 students, or if you just want to, if you're in a one-to-one scenario, you can just use it for free. There's 45 levels that are with our free version, and then after that, like if you want to start using some of the advanced levels, it's a per student license depending on how many students you get. So if you add more students, it's a little bit less for each student, and then, or if you want to just get in-app purchases, you can do that. It's about $6.99 per iPad. So, and that unlocks all of the advanced levels.
And speaking of tablets, how soon is Kodable going to be in the Android tablet industry?
So we're working on the web version, and once we get that out, we're hoping to have the Android version out a little bit after that. But our first priority is the web version, and then possibly the Android version. So I'd say few months, but it's hard to like judge these things. So it all depends on, like I said, things that come up, and you just have to work around. So yeah.
Now, with Kodable, both on the web version and also on the iPad version, with a lot of the coding programs, you can't actually like save your progress. Like you have to start over again from the very beginning every time that you want to like log on. How's Kodable set up in terms of progression?
Yeah, you can. Do you mind if I grab some water real quick? Actually, my voice is so it hurts. Okay.
So while we take a little break, if anybody has any questions, feel free to add them in the question and answer app located to the, I'm guessing this is the right of your screen.
All right, sorry about that. So you can set up classes and actually enter a class code onto the iPad, and that'll pull up all of your student profiles that are associated with that class, and they'll be able to resume playing no matter what iPad they played on, whether they were playing the web version at home and then came back to school to start on the iPad. As long as they enter that class code, they can begin playing where they left off. So we save all of their progress. And it's not saved on the device, it's saved by us. So it's secure, and you know, if the app gets deleted for some reason, you're not going to lose it. It's all saved. So we do all of that. And John and Mark, our programmers, are always working really hard to make sure that the progress is like, it's like the most like prized possession. Like we make sure that it's always saved, because we never want to see sad faces when you're teaching programming.
Well, sometimes that's a good thing, because that shows that they're trying and putting forth effort, which sometimes you don't get in the regular classroom.
That's true. That's true. One time we had a teacher lose progress, and she sent us a picture of all of her students holding the iPad. And I was like, oh gosh, you're breaking our hearts. I'm sorry. So yeah, that's our number one. We always make sure that the kids don't lose the progress, because it's pretty important to them. So.
How is it going to work with the web-based Kodable? Is there going to be like a single sign-on option? Yeah.
I think what we try to do is start small, and then add, like as the web version grows and we iterate on it, we'll be adding things like that, like single sign-on. I think starting out, the progress won't sync between the web version and the iPad, but then within like a week or two, we'll have that. And then later we'll probably add the single sign-on stuff. It's just going to be a work in progress.
Sure, sure. As we move into the hour of code, I know Tara's got stuff working at her school. We've got an event coming up next Wednesday night. I'm working with teachers, and I know I'm not the only one. There are teachers all over trying to find ways to bring coding into what they're doing in the classroom. And so my question for you would be, like, what advice or suggestions do you have for teachers who are looking to incorporate programming into their curriculum?
Yeah, well, this is my favorite week of like the entire year. I'm so excited. So I'm glad that you all are too. Basically, just look at what technology you have available and take a look at the code.org Learn page. Figure out like what you can use with the technology that you have, and pick one or two things that like you definitely want to get to, and just stick with that and go with it. Don't be afraid. The kids will pick it up and go on their own pretty quickly, and then within minutes you'll know like whether this app or this program is a hit or not, because there will be a buzz in the room. So they'll be talking and working together, and they'll be able to answer each other's questions. So you don't have to feel like you need to know everything. It's probably a good idea to work through like whatever you choose to use on your own, like the day before or something, just so that you have an idea. But you don't have to do all of it. Just spend like 20 minutes going through it and have an idea of what to expect. But once you get to a certain point, like the kids are they're gonna take off, and they're gonna be able to answer each other's questions, and it's a really good opportunity to kind of work through problems together as a class. So like if there is a problem and you don't know the answer to it, don't worry. You can put it up on the board, or share the iPad with everyone, or share your computer screen with everyone, and work on it together as a class. and it's a really good opportunity to do like group problem solving, you know, and work through the problem together. So don't be afraid. It doesn't have to be a scary thing. It's a really fun thing. Just give it a try, and always, you know, feel free to reach out to us, to reach out on Twitter. Anybody who is participating, I'm sure will have a quick answer for you if you know, reach a barrier. So just tap into your network and be sure to ask them for help if you need it. Yeah. So.
Right. I like that you start off by saying sort of assess what technology you have, right? Because I mean, people listening might assume, well, you know, we don't have a lot of computers. I don't have access to the iPad cart or, you know, the Nexus 7 tablets that we have. That's a good place to start. And what's great about Hour of Code and the code.org tutorials is they don't assume access to technology at all, right? There are activities that can be done without any technology at all.
Yeah.
So that's a really good place to start.
And Kodable actually has an activity up there, My Fuzz Family.
The Fuzz Family Frenzy. So the Fuzz Family are furry aliens in the game, and they've all crashed onto this planet called Smeeborg, and we decided to make our own like screen-free Fuzz Family themed game, so you can play and start learning programming even if you don't have an iPad. It's pretty fun. It's one of my favorite things to do with students. I love it.
And so you think, right, so if I'm someone who's never done coding before and you say to me, well, what do you mean I can learn programming without a computer? What does that even mean? What would I learn by doing the Fuzz Family Frenzy?
You'd be learning the idea of like programming logic and like how specific. I like to tell kids, you know, the idea behind the game is that you have a partner and you have to program them to like complete a maze or complete an obstacle course or get from one end of the room to the other. And you have to think like they're a computer, and a computer does exactly what it's told no matter what, even if it's wrong. And so you have to be really specific when you're giving a computer instructions, because it'll do whatever you tell it to do. And so if you want it to get to one end to the other, you have to think about it step by step by step, make sure that you're thinking through the problem logically, and kind of test and iterate and think through it a little bit on your own before you try and execute with your robot. So yeah, they'd be learning a lot of like the logic that's involved with programming and exactly what it means. It helps to give them sort of like a tangible example of like what actually programming is. I always recommend that people start with that anyway, even if they're going to move into like using technology or using computers, iPads, whatever. I like to start screen-free always first anyway, just because it helps the younger kids like really get a grasp for what it means to program.
Well, and last week we had a conversation with a college math instructor who was talking about the difference between logic and syntax when it comes to programming, and that it's hard to do both at the same time because that's technically two different sides of the brain. And that when you're approaching coding and programming, that you have to figure out like which way to approach first, whether it's going to be logic-based or whether it's going to be syntax-based. Can you explain a little bit about like the differences?
It sounds like he's probably the better person to ask if he'd be the expert, but I think what you're asking, so logic is more of like the high level like way of thinking about like solving a problem, like making sure you're thinking about it logically. And then if you're programming, like the syntax that you're going to use to like actually execute the solution to that problem. Does that make sense? So like for all of the different programming languages, there's different syntax that's involved, and it's different words, and like it works differently. But the actual logic is pretty much the same. So the logic to solve a problem is sort of the high level, and then the syntax would be like the lowest level like of executing that solution. Does that answer the question?
It does. It kind of like reminds me of like logic-based being like visually what you see in block-based coding, versus syntax being like the case sensitiveness of like these characters do this, and yeah,
Yeah.
like in script-based.
And most programmers will tell you, like, as long as you learn the logic of programming, learning a language and the syntax for a language is pretty easy, like once you've learned the logic that's involved. So, for example, like if you learn how to code in Python, it'd be pretty easy for you to pick up another language just because you've already learned programming logic, understanding like how to think like a programmer. And then like the syntax is just like the words and symbols that you use in order to do it. It's just a matter of like memorizing them.
Makes sense.
So I have a question from someone here on Twitter who's wondering if you have suggestions for resources for people who are interested in learning more about Kodable specifically, but also coding support or anything that helped them, as you did, sort of teach themselves a little bit about how to begin this process of learning how to program. If there are people, specifically leaders in the field, who you would suggest sort of following via Twitter or Google Plus or something like that. If there are communities or groups that they could sort of check out. And then I have a question, if you could talk a little bit about the Kids Can Code.
That was the first thing I was going to say. So a really good resource is our weekly Twitter chat, Kids Can Code. This week we're taking a break because of Thanksgiving. We figure a lot of people are going to be traveling, but every Tuesday at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, we have a Twitter chat dedicated to talking about some issue in programming education, whether it's screen-free programming, whether it's pair programming, getting girls interested in programming. Like, we talk about a lot of different topics, and there's a good group of people who come out every week, and they have awesome stories and really good solutions to problems. I think that both of you all have been there, participated. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it starts back next week on Tuesday night. And we always are up for suggestions on topics. So if you have any suggestions for topics, you can always tweet at us and let us know what that is. And then our archives are posted on our blog, blog.kodable.com, and you can read all of the Kids Can Code archives there. And as far as resources for getting started with Kodable, probably the best is just to go to our website, kodable.com, or email me or John, or just download the app and try it with some kids. I think that's the best thing to do, honestly. Like, you can read about it, you can talk to people about it, you can do all of the research in the world that you want, but until you see kids using it, like, it's really hard to like actually understand what it means and what it is. And so I think the best thing is to just find a kid that you can sit down with for 10 to 15 minutes and let them play with it. And just, it's really simple to get started. You just download it and off you go. So that's, and
Thanksgiving break is a great time, right? We're going to be with family.
Exactly, family,
for
friends.
A long weekend. Download it, sit down with your niece or your nephew, and figure it out together.
Yeah, definitely. And then if you want to get started coding like as an adult on your own, if you want to start teaching yourself, John, my co-founder, actually wrote a really good 3-part series on our blog about how he taught himself programming. Oh. And it's a really cool story. So that's probably the best resource. He lists a ton of resources that he used and like that he recommends in those posts. So that's what I would suggest.
Awesome. I'm writing both of those down.
Yeah, definitely. And I can post these links to this stuff on the event page after we're done if you want.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Yeah, if you don't mind.
No problem.
Tara, do you have any follow-up questions?
I meant to mention people. You all, Coding Connect, Tara, Sam Patterson is a great resource. Let's see. Empowers3 is her Twitter handle. Maggie Powers, she's in Philadelphia. She has some really cool stuff. I'm trying to think. There's a few other people that are like slipping my mind. Karen Learman, she does some really cool stuff.
She's in our cohort.
Yeah. She's great. So I'll post some other people to follow on Twitter if you're looking for some ideas on getting started programming.
That would be great. I mean, because we're looking obviously to continue these types of conversations with people to help teachers learn a bit more about programming and coding and how they may or may not bring it into the curriculum based on, you know, what they want to do. So people that you would have who you think would be interesting and have you know, helpful things to talk about, we would love that list.
Yeah, absolutely. I've started a Kids Can Code directory of like everyone who participates. So you just like add your name and then like what you're interested in, and that we share that pretty frequently.
Okay.
So you can take a look at that too.
Directory. Awesome.
Yeah.
Tara, you want to?
No, I already asked that question. So, yeah, I think that's about it. And I think that we've answered all of our audience questions.
And we've totally blasted your voice, and we can tell. Sorry.
I know. I have to go home and like gargle salt water or something. I don't know.
Thank you for hanging in with us. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you all for having me. It's been a lot of fun. And I want to continue to like support you all. So if you have any questions, you can always email me, reach out on Twitter, anything. So.
Great.
Sounds awesome. Well, thank you all for joining in, and have a great night and a happy Thanksgiving.
Bye. Thanks
you. Thanks,
all.
Gretchen.